Now I open the floor for discussion. Delegates, it's time also for you. In your comment and question, please be short and concise, so we can leave time to as many as possible. And I will start with our Ukrainian friend, Galina Mikhaliuk from Verkhovna Rada. Galina, the floor is yours.
Yes. Commissioner Kubilius, Assistant Secretary General Goffus, on behalf of the Parliament of Ukraine, I would like to express our sincere gratitude for every single piece of support that was provided to Ukraine. You did a tremendous job from the very first day of our long way towards independence, sovereignty and freedom. We do understand that bravery of our soldiers is not enough just to succeed in this brutal full-scale invasion, and the fact that all the democratic nations have gathered together their efforts and supported us from the very first day. We are still, thanks to your efforts, we are still the free, democratic, sovereign nation on the map of the free world. Indeed, sincere gratitude to all your job done, to always be in contact with the Parliament of Ukraine, for hearing us and for being always on the same page. Thank you a lot. Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini. Thank you, Galina. And now we will go to Michael Katrinis from Greece. The floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Commissioner, to prevent the European Union from falling into contradictions with regard to securing democracies through strength, as it's the logo of the Union, two critical questions arise. How can it be ensured that in initiatives such as the SAFE platform, only third countries that fully respect the values and principles of the European Union are allowed to participate, including democratic governance, international law and the Union's cohesion? And the second one is, in case where a third country openly threatens or engages in practices that challenge the territorial integrity and sovereign rights of European member states, how can it be ensured that its participation does not undermine the credibility and effectiveness of both collective and national security and defence of the member states? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And now we will go to Dragan Kovacki from North Macedonia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Szczerba. My question goes to or I should say, I would like a comment from the distinguished Defence Commissioner. As you know, my country, as a NATO member, faces obstacles on its path towards the European Union membership due to identity-related issues raised by an allied country that is a member of both NATO and the European Union. I personally remain convinced that the European Union integration is the right path and our strategic commitment. However, I am concerned about the direction this process is taking, as there is a real risk that it could be exploited by the third parties for their own interests that are different from both NATO and EU interests. This concern stems from the vote to remove references to the Macedonian identity and language from the report of the European Parliament, a step that has seriously undermined the trust we have carefully built over the years. I believe that trust is the foundation of every partnership, alliance and friendship. With the adoption of the amendments to erase the references of Macedonian identity and language, I think that the principles of equality and mutual respect are disregarded. The approach of might makes right undermines the basis of cooperation and trust among allies. To restore trust, mutual respect is needed. We as a country remain fully committed towards the full EU membership. But sincere reciprocal efforts from our partners are also necessary to strengthen our trust and preserve the principles of equality and respect that we all believe in. Dear Defence Commissioner, I am convinced that long-term stability and integration are possible only if political maturity and principled conduct are demonstrated. Otherwise, we risk not only stagnation, but also erosion of trust, and as stated before, providing space for malicious actors that can affect stability and security. Having in mind that European security is inseparable of NATO security, I would appreciate a comment from the Defence Commissioner. Thank you, and sorry for being so long.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we go to our Polish colleague, Piotr Strach from Polish Sejm. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the discussion about logistic. I think that every soldier could say that logistic is the most important thing in the military stuff. Few data, 162 bridges in Central and Eastern Europe is enabled to drive heavy equipment. Via Baltica, Rail Baltica, it's still not finished. Switzerland and Austria are logistic black holes now. Transport to Europe is a red tape nightmare. So about evacuation of people who would be threatened by enemy is now, I think, impossible. So my question is about the details, about roadmap, about milestones, timeline, when we would be ready, because most of those cases do not need any costs, just procedures. So do you have any direct plan when we would be ready? Thank you.
Thank you, Piotr. And now I would like to propose that we have to fix 1 minute time for questions. So all of our colleagues can ask the question or give a comment. Now we'll go to Nicola Carré from Italy. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a couple of very quick questions to the Commissioner, and thank you very much for your comprehensive presentations. One of the things, or two things that come up to my mind after your presentation is, one is that the European defence industry is, one of the obligations to fulfil the obligations that will be put upon them. And the second thing is, if I understood correctly, is that by 2035, nearly 3.5 trillion euros. And the defence industry, the European defence industry, will be ready to actually deliver such defence requirements, or would the European countries look at different countries outside the European Union to actually source alternative equipment? And then, since the community engagement is a very big key issue in relation to the explanations on why we're actually going toward spending this huge amount of money in defence and promoting civic participation and community resilience against divisive narrative is an extremely key issue. Do we have a common strategy to actually, as a contingency plan, to address these new plans? Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. And now we go to Simona Malpezzi from Italy. 1 minute, please.
Yes, I will be fast. A question for Mr. Commissioner Kubilius. President Trump mentioned that NATO could buy weapons from the US and give them to Ukraine. How exactly would that work, and could the EU be a part of these mechanisms? Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. And now we'll go to Martin Stakis from European Parliament. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Szczerba. I think what European Commission has done last 6 months, I think is really remarkable. Rearm Europe initiative, SAFE program, defense omnibus. I think, Mr. Kubilius, you have done great work. And, of course, I always question myself, can we do more? And if there's one thing in this House we are very good at, it's on work on some regulations on standardization. We have one charger for our phones. I think it's a great achievement. But when it comes to the military interoperability and the military industry, then we see some challenges. So in your opinion, should the EU create stricter regulations requiring leading military systems manufacturers to comply with NATO standards, not only for ammunition calibers, but also for weapon system interoperability? One lesson we have learned from Ukraine that currently even the same 155 millimeter shells, each weapon system needs to be individually adjusted. So what's your opinion about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Martins. And now we go to Daria Safai from Belgium. The floor is yours, Daria.
Thank you so much. We are talking about lesson learned, and this is very important. We talk about the lessons that Ukraine has learned. I think it's also very important to remember what Europe should have done when the attack on Crimea in 2014 has happened. Sometimes we forget that the only language that our enemies, they know is just reacting so hard that they stop. But very important thing for European, I think, at this moment is that there is a country in Middle East which makes everything unsafe, which has the ambition to have a nuclear weapon, Islamic Republic of Iran. But I think it's also very important to remember what are the lessons learned about, for example, the last attacks of President Trump, which I think I have said also in European countries already 10 years that the only way that the Ayatollahs they can understand and going backward is if we have the military option on the table. If we take it from the table, then they never come to negotiations. So I think it was a good thing that President Trump has shown that the military option is always on the table if they don't want to negotiate. But still we are hearing that there are countries, European countries especially, that are pleading for only diplomacy. Is it possible? Which are the lessons that we can learn from what we have seen and what we have not yet seen? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And two very brief points. The first one is on the whole of society approach to defense. And I'm glad that you already mentioned the lessons learned from Ukraine, from the Baltic and the Nordics, where we really have this. And I think needing to understand that Russia is involved in a hybrid warfare against all of our countries at the moment, and that they're actually really going for the divisions within our society. So I was very happy to hear about your views on the very concrete paths of strengthening resilience in companies, etc. But I think the real strength of our societies, but also the weakness of our societies, is social cohesion. And that is really where Russia is going at, trying to have a butter versus cannons debate, trying to really go for the industrially more left behind places. And I know that the Norwegians just produced a defense strategy that was actually focusing on social cohesion even before arms production, etc. And I'd be intrigued to what extent these lessons of the social strength of our societies is really on the top of the agenda there, and how you want to strengthen that. And then the second point is developing a little bit on what Martin's just said. I know that one of the weakness points of the cooperation between NATO and the EU when it comes to norms and standards is that obviously NATO standards are classified, and that the EU to some extent can't access those. And as I understand it, there's a need for a cooperation agreement of being able to actually share that, and I'd be intrigued to hear from the Commissioner as well to what extent you are moving towards an agreement on that we can actually access those so we can implement them on a European level. Thank you.
Thank you, Tobias. Thank you for this question. And now we'll go to our Italian colleague, head of Italian delegation, Lorenzo Cesa. Lorenzo, the floor is yours, and welcome to the European Parliament again.
Grazie. I speak in Italian. Grazie, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for letting me come back and seeing you here. I must say I've spent a lot of years of my life in this Parliament. I'm very pleased that we've got a Commissioner for Defense here in Europe, and I had the honor to meet with somebody very important, Mrs. Spedis, who's been working in Parliament, this person was quite a mythological person for me, quite extraordinary. And she's sent many messages, is that the fact that Europe doesn't seem to want to build a defense system that would be alternative to NATO, but in NATO there are countries which are not in Europe, and I'm very pleased that they want to have an additional defense system, but that the objective that Europe wants to pursue is the union of European defense. And I must recall that this was an idea of somebody from one of the founding fathers of Europe. And at that time, the Italian founding father of the EU was disappointed that the defense union didn't go through. How organized would we be toward this European defense? And getting an army, but could we get closer coordinators and coordination of European armies to try to meet the challenges? We've been doing extraordinary things, but I know that time is running out, but I think that the fact that we have a defense commissioner is a great sign, but if we want to keep Europe standing and really want to promote it, the work you will be doing is going to be of ultimate and crucial importance. Thank you.
And, of NATO PA, Agnes Vadai from Hungary. The floor is yours, Agnes.
Thank you, Mr. President, if I may say, and thank you for this very interesting panel. Well, I don't want to hurt anybody, but middle-aged men and like younger ladies are discussing defense, resilience and preparedness in rooms of EU and NATO capitals. But how do we inspire and encourage our younger generation in Europe, which fortunately has never experienced war and has never experienced communism? So how do we encourage them to understand the seriousness of the situation? Because after all, we can talk about defense industry, it's very important. We can talk about machinery, weapons, but it's just iron. And iron without man, it's good for nothing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Now we go to Zoran Dragicic from Serbia. The floor is yours, Zoran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Szczerba. My question is addressed to Mr. Goffus. Thank you very much for your very comprehensive presentation. I am not just a politician, I am also professor of Belgrade University and the Faculty of Security Studies. My question is about education and about training of population as a critical part of resilience. Do we have enough capacity to make one program, common program of education for civil protection, especially among youngsters, among children in the schools and students in the faculties, and whole population, how to train them and prepare them to be ready to face new challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zoran. And the last speaker will be Mustafa Kaya from Turkey. The floor is yours, Mustafa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Crises such as the war in Ukraine have fundamentally reshaped Europe's understanding of defense and preparedness, revealing both strengths and vulnerabilities within existing security structures. In light of this, what key structural lessons have NATO and Europe drawn from these ongoing transformation? Furthermore, considering the importance of broader regional cooperation, how do you envision the role of non-EU NATO allies like Turkey in contributing to and being integrated within this evolving Euro-Atlantic security architecture?
Thank you very much, Mustafa, and I will briefly return to the floor to our speakers to reply to the questions, and we will start with Mr. Commissioner.
Well, thanks a lot. I understood one word briefly, but now tell me how to do it. You know, I got 14 questions perhaps. And I understood that the European Union is much more important than NATO, you know. So really, sorry, but I will try to run maybe, very briefly, maybe not to everybody, but just going from one question to another. Well, first of all, Galina from Ukraine. I'm always feeling myself badly when Ukrainians are saying how grateful they are to us. We are grateful to you. That's, my very simple way. And we need to do much more because you are sacrificing your lives, for your freedom and for our freedom. So we shall stay grateful to you, forever. That's one thing. Second, Michal from Greece on third countries. I understand what you have in mind when you are talking about if safe loans will be available for third countries, which are, according to your opinion, not fulfilling all the democracy criteria and threatens another member states. Well, I cannot elaborate here too much. In regulation, I think there is quite a clear language on eligibility criteria to all the, third countries, how they can get access to those loans. But my, very simple wish would be that in face of the threats which we are facing, Russian threats from one side, Iran, what was asked, from another side, and Middle East, which can explode very easily, we on the European continent should try to find the best solution, which, of the problems which we have in our bilateral relations. Now, time is demanding that, to be here very decisive. So that's my answer to the question from our colleague from Greece. Now, North Macedonia, absolutely the same. Now, of course, as Commissioner, I'm not involved into negotiations on enlargement and things like that, but I would remind, when I was member of European Parliament during last mandate, we had quite an important report on new enlargement strategy. Tonino Picula from Croatia, socialist, was leading. I was shadow. And we put some very simple language. First of all, we put that, all the enlargement we expected at that time, we put the language that all the enlargement should be concluded before 2030. Still, I think that that's realistic. But second, we put also that it's totally unacceptable that, member states, which are members of the European Union, are trying to resolve their, what I would call historical issues, blocking negotiations with candidate countries. And our suggestion was very simple. Let's get out, those conflicts should be resolved in a different way, not by blocking, negotiations. And this, unfortunately, this is still the case, and that is, I would say, unfair to our candidate countries. All of us, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, we were going through terrible times during the 20th century. The borders were moving to one side, to another side. Minorities are now, in different places. A lot of, different crimes, genocide, and so on was happening during that period of time. And in some way now, definitely that, left a lot of scars, a lot of emotions. But when we're trying to resolve those emotions and we're trying to convince another candidate country, no, you should apologize, you should take all the responsibilities, or we shall block, the enlargement, I don't think that this is really fair, and especially that, we have such kind of behavior from member states which are from Central and Eastern Europe. When we were becoming, members of EU, we were very happy that, the Western Europeans were not raising some of those issues, but perhaps they were able to raise them. So let's learn also here the lessons. Piotr from Poland on logistics. Absolutely agree. I think this is one of the top priorities. In the autumn this year, we shall put so-called joint communication on military mobility, together with some legislation, especially on bureaucratic procedures on the borders. We shall try to simplify them as much as it is possible. But here again, I would urge us also on the member states level to work very closely with NATO. Because sometimes I fear that, we as, national governments, we have our own priorities, how to spend European Union money. And I was quite surprised when I asked NATO, people how they are going to bring troops to the Baltic states if the X will come. It appeared, quite a different picture from what we were building till that moment, where we were expecting what kind of, corridors for military mobility we need to build. So I will not elaborate on that too much, but this is really a priority. So now on, colleague from Italy, I did not put the name, sorry, on industry and will industry be ready to deliver if we are, coming with really big amounts of financial resources? Well, I hope that industry will be able to deliver. We are working with the industry. We are looking how really to remove obstacles, bureaucratic obstacles in their job. Also, we are looking how to, to make industry more ready with our very clear and big contracts. That is why joint procurement from our side is one of things which is very important for industries also to scale up their production, to join their forces, and to be ready for big aggregated demand. From another side, we need to remember that member states, and majority of money will come from member states. Those, 4 trillion, what I calculated, will be the money coming from member states. Member states are not regulated how they want to spend their money for defense. If they will decide that all of them will go to United States or to South Korea, they will do that. I will be critical on such a decision. I will say, well, this is a strategic mistake. We need to develop our own industry, European industry, because European industry is one of the defense resources, but member states are free to decide. So that's where we shall need to work all together, how to convince member states, how to incentivize them to go for more of joint procurement, to more of European procurement, and that is where European Union level programs with substantial financial capacity will be very important. Because only through incentivizing or convincing member states to go for more European production, we can achieve something. I do not believe in any kind of regulation that we could, as European Union would say now, from now, European Union member states are prohibited to, procure equipment from other countries. That will not work. On civilian participation, let's remember that we have also Preparedness Union strategy, which is very, very much also part of the whole, concept of what we need to do in order to be ready. And it is built on a very important report of Sauli Niinistö, former Finnish president, on our preparedness. Simona, Italian, Trump said that NATO can buy weapons for Ukraine from United States. I don't know what NATO decided, but definitely, as we hear now from public information, for example, Germans are negotiating with Americans to procure, several, I don't know how much, Patriot batteries. That is very important. Second, EU as such is not procuring weapons even for ourselves. That is done by member states. So member states can take loans, what we are offering, and can use those loans in procuring what they want. Now, Martins from Latvia, our colleague MEP, on thanks a lot for nice words. I'm always repeating, those are just the first steps. Much more will be needed to be done. So on interoperability, on standardization, let's look how we can do that. I think that it can be very much related with our next steps on so-called development of flagship projects or defense projects of common European interest, which now we are starting discussion. Since we have NATO capability targets and we can have some kind of what we call aggregated demand, and we can see, for example, how many new tanks NATO is asking member states to acquire. The question is how member states will do that. Will they go for joint procurement, procuring one or two types of tanks, or will they stay, alone and going, one will buy 20 tanks from one company, another will buy, 100 tanks from another company? My preference is the first one. To agree among member states that let's go for, that is for military experts to say how many different types of tanks we need to have, and then to go to procure those tanks, to ask our industries to produce. Then it will be the solution of interoperability. That's my point. Now, on Daria from Belgium, on lessons learned, definitely we are learning and learning. And sometimes I'm asking myself how to do that. We should learn, really the history lessons, sometimes very tragic lessons, not repeating them. For example, when we're talking now about Ukraine and, somebody saying, well, Ukraine needs to give, some territory in order to achieve peace, I'm asking myself, what is the difference from Munich Agreement on, Czechoslovakia territory? I do not see a big difference. And I know where Munich agreements, what was the consequence. So why to repeat again the same mistake? Let's learn the lessons, And definitely, peace through strength is, very clear formula in some cases when diplomacy is not working. Simply, we need to make a clear conclusion if diplomacy is working or not working. I see that maybe, time is coming when everybody, including President Trump, is starting to understand that diplomacy with Putin is not working, which we knew from the very beginning. Now, but it's good that, things are moving into that discussion, into that direction. Tobias on social cohesion, social strengths. I think this is a really crucial topic. But I am not sure that we can, that I will answer you, in a very simple way. Because in my view, we are not paying enough of attention to structural challenges, structural problems to our democracies in general. Not external challenges, internal challenges. We are forgetting, in my view, we are forgetting that democracy, as we learned, was created when industrial revolution was going on, and when industrial society was created. Now we're starting to live in post-industrial society, which is much more individualized. And that brings challenges to democracy. I will not give easy answers, but I'm saying, well, we need to understand that structural democracy really is challenged even from internal developments, and that it makes it much weaker to resist, external challenges. But then it's not enough when we're talking about, this resilience of our societies. It's not enough just to talk how we are fighting against hybrid, it's important to talk about that. But let's look more deeply into, internal challenges for our societies and for our democracy. Now, Lorenzo from Italy, thanks a lot. Very good thoughts. Absolutely, Sometimes I am, again, from history you can learn some good things which did not happen, and the question is, can we repeat simply? I'm so much, impressed, and perhaps we are forgetting what, let's say, godfathers of our European Union, our European community were trying to do with the defense when they proposed the European Defense Community Treaty. De Gasperi, Schuman, Monnet, Adenauer, everybody else were promoting that, treaty. Unfortunately, then it failed in French Senate. But why not to look for inspiration now, I'm not saying that it should be repeated, everything. I'm not so sure about European army at the moment. But, to have very clear structure, European one, very clear, institutional arrangement. I'm always repeating that, till now we're taking care and we're paying a lot of attention to material side of our defense readiness. Time is coming for us to look into institutional readiness, how we are organizing ourselves. It's not against NATO, inside of NATO, but since we're taking responsibility on our shoulders on peace on the European continent, we need to look also into that area. And I was very much inspired by my recent meeting, it was last Friday in Rome, during Ukraine conference with Minister Guido Crosetto. And we spoke very similar ideas. So Italy is really can do a lot, to assist Ukraine. Now, Agnes from Hungary on young generation. I think that, young generation, is at least in Lithuania, I do not see any problem with young generation. They are very, very, very strong in favor of European defense. Perhaps we have the problem, geographical one. That, in our region, next to the border of Russia, everybody is very much, concerned and mobilized and so on. In some, more countries which are deeper to the south, this, not the case. But I do not see very big here danger. And I will not answer to the question of our colleague from Serbia, since that was a question to NATO. But to our Turkish friends, structural lessons, yes, we need to be much more united. And again, I would repeat what I said at the very beginning. It would be good to resolve all the bilateral issues as quickly as we can in a prudent way in order to be able to unite on European level in a much stronger way. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we'll go to our second speaker, Mr. Goffus. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I agree that Andrius had to take the brunt, which means I can go through this much quicker. I really appreciate him getting to go first. So if I start off, thank you to Ukraine. Bravery is important, but it needs to be supplemented. And in fact, we're learning from you. My conception of the Joint Analysis Training Education Center, the JTEC or Lessons Learned piece, came from my experience with Ukraine after the Crimea War, 2015. As a Senate staffer, I went to oversee where we were putting our money. And I remember they pulled, I think it was a lieutenant colonel off of the front line, and he's briefing me from some talking points, and he's talking about, yes, and these radios aren't quite compatible. And I stopped him and I said, well, maybe we can send somebody and they can advise you on, radio communications. And by the way, every single radio in all around the world doesn't work with any other single radio. So it's a normal kind of problem, if you will. He got a little upset at me. Actually, it was 2016. He looked up from his notes and he said, well, we've been fighting the Russians for 2 years now. Maybe we could advise you. And that's what this Lessons Learned Center is all about. And hopefully we're doing some of that. So what we get from Ukraine is what they're doing on the battlefield, but also how they're learning, how they're innovating. There's a lot to learn here, and I think that we will. On the Polish question on red tape, hell yeah. I had to send some trucks across Europe, heavy armored vehicles, and they got stuck at a border. Now, it was only about 48 hours, but it was because, and I got yelled at by a prime minister who had to, what he said, pull an all-nighter to get this truck across because the paperwork wasn't filled out. They hadn't paid the private some of the fees because it was a private company moving them. And I thought exactly what you did, which was, why aren't we standardized? Why doesn't every border have the same procedures so that you don't have to guess every time you go across a new border? Now, we ironed it out, but we're doing that on a onesie-twosie basis. We need to get better at that. And I'm hoping that one of the leverages that the EU has is law. This should be a law to standardize the procedures. I think that would be really helpful. On Italy and trying to spend the 5%, I hear that quite a bit. I work for a Dutch boss, and he claims that if you have a problem spending your money, he will find ways for you to do it. Your question is a valid one, though, based on defense production capacity. However, when I get asked that question, I say at least three things that I know off the top of my head. Number one, readiness. Flying hours, steaming hours, exercises, spare parts. There's not a long line for those. You can do those right now. Number two, commercial off-the-shelf space. This is stuff that's ready in months, not years, where you can be an actor in space. Number three, you all remember Operation Spiderweb, where all those drones went into Russia and hit all the bombers sitting out in the open. Imagine at least your fighter aircraft should all be in concrete shelters. If they had those, then those little drones just bounce off and go away. Everybody's nation has the ability to pour concrete. So we have places to put that money for absolute certain. I think that's really important. On the question about President Trump and his proposal, Secretary General Rutte is in Washington, D.C., trying to work out the modalities right now. We'll see how this works, what the best way of doing it is. And trust me, knowing Andrius, if I see any angle that will help to have the EU involved, I will definitely come and ask him. He and I have been talking about this SAFE mechanism since before it even got passed, to be prepared to try and use that to help Ukraine, help buy from Ukraine for Ukraine. So there's a there. We just need to figure out what it is. It's just not baked yet. On NATO standards, heck yeah. The Ukrainians have 12 different 155 systems, and you would assume that it's like bullets. If the caliber's right, you're good. That's not true. They're not compatible. We need to work through that and figure out how to do that right. On lessons learned from Crimea and Iran from Belgium, I'm right there with you. I think we are learning. I think one of the U.S. presidents that said walk quietly and carry a big stick means that you can do both. You can be diplomatic and you can have a good military option. And in the NATO Defense College, in all of the defense colleges around the world, they teach you the DIME acronym. They're not separate. They're all together, and you should use all of them. Diplomacy, information, military, and economic. They go hand in hand. That's going to be true in Ukraine for absolute certain. And one of the squeeze points is going to be the economy of Russia. It's an oil economy. Something like 70% of their federal budget comes from oil, and most of that is carried in the shadow fleet that we see going around the world. One of those places, and 70% of that goes through the Baltic Sea at some point in time on a shadow fleet. In territorial waters, I know because I asked our lawyers, you can hail and board a ship like a shadow fleet ship to do legitimate things like show me your insurance. Where are all your life rafts and life vests? This is where we all hate the green eyeshade bureaucrat. I say unleash a whole army of green eyeshade bureaucrats on the shadow fleet and put them on board and go, I've never been on a ship that doesn't leak. What's that? That might be pollution. I want you to look at that. And even if you don't fully stop them, you at least delay them. That's how we're going to squeeze it. And your job here, especially, is sanctions. We think they have a real possibility to pull Mr. Putin to a grinding halt. This is what is financing his war in Ukraine. He can't survive without it. So let's try and do something about that is my big pitch. And we've said this for Ukraine, with Ukraine for a long time now, and that's why I want you to buy from Ukraine for Ukraine, because it's going to help them negotiate from a position of strength. That is the only way to negotiate with Putin. There is no other way. So we're going to get Ukraine there. I'm quite confident. Social cohesion, Tobias, yeah, you bet. This is part of total defense, so it's in there. Strategic comms is one of those big pieces. Fighting disinformation is one key piece I can pull out. Other than that, it's a bit of a black art for me, but it's something that we will definitely try and study. And our Swedish colleague that is with us in Bydgoszcz, Poland, will be focused on exactly that, I'm quite sure. On European defense, I'm for as strong a European army as we can possibly get. And I think that Andrius pointed out some really good areas that it's going to take. One of the pieces that you're missing right now to actually do that is logistics. Modular bridges, flatbed wagons, roll-on, roll-off ships, armored ambulances, things like that. So we've got that piece that I think we can all work on. From Agnes in Hungary, yeah, how do you teach the younger generation? This is a tough one. It really is. Because, especially as parents, your whole life is spent making your children feel safe. It's kind of the opposite of worrying about war and worrying about communism. So you're treading a fine line there. And that, and how the same with our friends from Serbia, and how you get education and training of the population. More and more countries are going back to conscription. I will say selective conscription. And that's where some people learn what their capabilities are, and you build that basic foundation. In Norway, they have something called selective conscription. I don't call it conscription because kids, they compete to have their service to their government be in the military. It's considered prestigious. That changes, and the reason they do that is not because they want to go to war. It's because when they get done with it, it will look like that their resume is much better. And so that's one way of incentivizing people to do that kind of thing. On Turkey, what I think this body is about, NATO is about, and the EU is about, is comparative advantage. And so what's Turkey's comparative advantage in my mind? Defense industry. We haven't tapped it enough. We could do more with their defense industry, and we're going to need more than we got right now. As I said from the summit, spend more, make more, support Ukraine more. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you to both speakers for a great session, and let us leave this room with a renewed sense of purpose. Our citizens don't expect perfection, but they demand preparedness, and thank you all. Let's continue our work with resolve, unity, and with strength.